at any of the numbers on CTV and streaming, it is now the way consumers most watch TV, right? And for most consumers, they are fully converged, right? There's no distinction between CTV and TV. You just are looking for good content. But the business side is still very fragmented, lots of challenges, lots of things to figure out. And so that's really what we're going to talk about today is what's going on in CTV. Are we at a CTV 2.0? Is there still a long way to go to get there? And so, great to talk to Chris from Beachfront on more on the supply side of this, Krista from Infillion on more on the demand side, or sort of across the whole spectrum here, and really dig in. But so to kick off, can you guys introduce yourselves? Just a bit about what your businesses do, because you can describe it better than I'm going to. And just to get to know each other a little bit here, what's the thing you've been streaming the latest, your latest stream? For me, Ted Lasso is just my go-to. It's the best show to feel good and at the end of a day. So that's my latest. Chris, we'll start with you.
I'll kick off. Ted Lasso is that's a good one. Hard to beat.
You can't copy, so you got to come up with a new one.
I'm not going to copy it. I'm going to show what a knucklehead I am in the content that I watch. I'm Chris McCarroll. I'm the CEO of Beachfront Media. And Beachfront Media is a supply-side ad technology company. And there's a lot that goes into that. We bring ad-serving functionality to publishers. We bring monetization and other tools to help them drive greater yield for their supply. I think what makes us different is Beachfront about 5 years ago decided that as TV continued to mature, and CTV played a bigger role in consumer behavior and consumption, that it was going to create some real fragmentation issues in terms of how TV was bought and sold. So Beachfront spent the last 5 years really digging into traditional TV tech to enable that for real-time and automated buying, programmatic. And we've converged those capabilities with our already robust streaming monetization platform. So we are really a converged TV ad server and help publishers with inventory that sits in a traditional ecosystem and a streaming ecosystem to monetize that through one automated process. Oh, my streaming.
Yeah.
The Last Kingdom.
Okay. Yes. I don't know that
You've
one.
never
I have
heard
to
of
look
it.
it up.
It's a great series.
Okay.
You'd like it.
There we go.
We could spend our whole time talking about that.
Yeah,
I
let's
mean,
just
I'm
talk
sure
about
everyone
shows
has
we
already
like.
been talking about AI and CTV enough these last couple of days. Krista Crone, I'm the president of Infillion Media, and we have built an advanced media buying platform that really touches on a full funnel solution for brands, for agencies, for advertisers, with a very unique focus on respecting consumers' time, attention, and privacy. And what does that mean is we bring a value exchange to the advertising experience. We're looking for consumers to actually opt in to receive an advertiser's message and be much more engaged and interacting with advertisers' marketing. We think that by putting the consumer first in an advertising experience, that marketers can get a better return on their investment. We were early in the CTV streaming environment and have been learning a lot about how consumers interact with ads in CTV, and we can talk more about that during our conversation. Huge Marvelous Mrs. Maisel fan. Very, very sad to see that series end, right? So good. And I'll watch it from start to finish again and again. And if you ask me what other job I would want to have in life, it would have been being location scout, prop design, costume design, casting director for Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Okay,
right?
so
And I love another fellow fan.
I was watching Marvelous Mrs. Maisel on my flight over, and then I realized I had one episode did not download before I left, so I'm like cliffhanger right now, and I can't get it. So
you're
until I
not
get
done.
home,
It
I'm
ended
like,
beautifully. It had a beautiful ending.
it's a very good show. Okay, so you talked about the consumer experience, and look, with CTV, this is supposed to bring more ability to target, make things more addressable to consumers, bring efficiencies to TV ad buying. And yet, if you watch CTV with advertising, often the experience is pretty bad, right? There's terrible reach and frequency problems. You often are seeing the same ad over and over again. Even though the ad load is supposed to be lighter, it still feels like there's lots of ads. Like, well, what would you say? Obviously, there's lots of issues we can dig into them. But what do you say is the biggest sort of challenge? Why is it that it is such a bad ad experience to start? What sort of led to that today, and maybe what's changing some of that?
You answer?
Yeah, that one's probably in my wheelhouse. Yeah. So I think there's a number of things that are lending to the problem. Listen, we're in the early stages of CTV still. So I think there's technology issues that are still getting worked through. I think there's rights issues that are still getting worked through. I think managing all of those things in new platforms that are helping to deliver ads in CTV creates some of the issue. I think it's getting better over time. I think we're seeing continued better trends. I know I see a lot less slates when I'm streaming TV today than I did a year ago and certainly 2 years ago. So I think we're evolving towards a better, TV-like ecosystem in streaming. We're just, it's been a slow build.
Yeah, I would say that the pandemic kind of helped us jump the shark in terms of consumers consuming streaming video, right? So that moment where all of a sudden we all realize, wow, we really can cut the cord and look at the amount of content that's available to us on streaming environments. Technology still needed time to catch up. And it does remind me of early days digital media, right? The user experience wasn't great when we all started blogging and vlogging, and it was a new platform, but the advertising experience was still pretty sloppy and messy. We're very, very tolerant as consumers on what we'll put up with in the advertising ecosystem because we love free content to a certain degree. So now it's really upon us as advertisers that I think consumers should expect more from us and that the technology advances a lot faster. Because now you have options, right? You can go to a subscription model, and if you're in a position where you can do that, you can just avoid a lousy advertising experience.
Absolutely. I think the free concept is sort of critical here. If you look at the numbers, free ad-supported streaming or FAST is really the fastest growing area of where consumers are spending their time with CTV, as we move to this channel, a lot of things like a lot of the premium guys have thought about, we're going to do 4 minutes of ads or 5 minutes an hour instead of the 16 to 18 you get in linear. And yet in free ad-supported streaming, they've got a full ad load there, and yet consumers are still coming. What do you think is driving the consumers there? How do you have a strong consumer experience while also having such a massive ad load? What are some of the innovations coming on that side of things?
I'm going to let Chris handle it because there's a lot of convergence that's happening here. But I think as consumers, we all very quickly realized that we were in subscription overload as well, and are starting to pay a little bit more attention to how that's hitting us financially. And when we want just pieces of content from all of the fragmented players in the content space, we may then lean more towards, I'll take that show if it's advertising supported, but I'm not sure I'm going to take Succession on Max with ads. So we have the ability to be selective because the content experience itself is so incredibly fragmented.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think cost is a big driver of why we're seeing, FAST accelerate. If you cut the cord 2 years ago, you were in a more favorable cost position from a monthly standpoint. Today, to get that same content, you're probably paying 50% more than prior to cutting the cord. To me, in terms of ad experience, I don't think we're creating a poor ad experience in FAST because it's got the same ad load that traditional TV had. We have an economics issue that's going to start persisting in television, and it's going to affect both the buy and the sell side. So we have 30, 40 million households. I could probably do this without a mic, but we have 30, 40 million households that haven't cut the cord yet and are watching a good chunk of their TV on a traditional box. You have the other half that's in a streaming, environment. And when you look at the economics from a brand's perspective, you're paying a monstrous rate to reach those targeted CTV advertisers. way more efficient over here on the traditional linear side. And what we're continuing to do is push more of that supply into really high-priced inventory. So we can continue to reduce ad loads. We can continue to try and create better user experiences, but you're going to start pricing major brands out of TV.
Yep.
So I think we're going to have to strike that balance over time. P&G is not going to pay $20 ads to sell toilet paper in television. It's not part of the business model. And we're just going to have to continue to figure out that balance between ad loads, creating ad space with unique creatives to help bring more efficiency to that ecosystem.
Okay, you have like 6 different avenues I want to go down from your response there and recategorizing TV and the economics. But let's stick on the creative front, and Krista, let's talk about that for a second. Given what's happening, and given that it's digital, there's a lot more opportunities for creative. There's a lot more opportunities for addressability. Can you talk about some of the stuff you guys are doing there, and what's the goal of the different creative you guys are bringing? What's sort of resonating? What's driving performance?
So a flagship product within the Infillion solution set is Truex, which is familiar to a lot of media buyers, a lot of brands, because it is the only guaranteed value exchange video product in the entire industry. And basically, the beauty of Truex is that the consumer opts in to watch the ad, and what they get in return is the rest of their viewing experience ad-free, or the rest of that ad pod ad-free, right? So you're truly getting something of value back, and that value back is your time, right? I can watch one ad, and the rest of my stream is advertising free. The benefit for the advertiser is we only charge them if the consumer has opted in, has spent 30 seconds with the ad, and has interacted with the ad at least once. So our billing method is a cost per engagement, and the advertiser only pays when the consumer has truly engaged. So when we talk about respecting consumers' time, their attention, and privacy, that actually translates into a currency for how we operate. It's very, very valuable. What we've done in order to encourage that interaction with an ad, with a Truex ad, is we've had to create very creative and appealing advertising. So when you're in a lean back moment and viewing CTV, you're willing to lean in to engage with an ad, and maybe that's taking a poll, maybe it's using your remote to change the color on a car that you're interested in buying, maybe it's actually using your remote to grab a product that you see in an ad and add it directly to your Amazon shopping cart. It is meant to give you pause, to take a moment to actually engage. So far from a standard 30-second pre-roll or mid-roll spot, this is truly an advertising experience. And that's the benefit of digital right now.
Well, and plus with that, all the interaction, you are, there's a couple things there, right? You are confirming that this actually happened, so you don't have to worry about any ads that may be running while a TV screen is off or things of that nature. You don't have to go through the currently very complicated measurement side of things in this ecosystem, and you get a massive amount of signal, right? I think one of the most interesting things about YouTube advertising, right, when YouTube launched their pre-roll advertising with the 6-second skip, is that what people didn't realize at first is that someone clicking skip is a huge signal that you can use to inform and better decide what to do and what to show, and you guys are getting similar signal. If someone opts out, that's a huge signal as well,
sure,
right?
Absolutely. And by the way, these are human beings. We also are guaranteeing that it is literally a human being interacting, and the pressure is on us to develop creative that does influence the consumer to engage, because we don't get paid if that doesn't happen. So a bit of a shout out to the creative studio within Infillion, because this is what they do for a living, is really, it's almost behavioral economics as well. How can I encourage a consumer in a lean back moment to grab that remote, and every remote is different, and understand how and where they want to interact with an ad to make it a more compelling experience for them. So creative plays a massive role in advancing the usage of this technology.
Very cool. So let's talk about the measurement stuff for a second. And Kristen, I'm not sure if it impacts you as much, but The measurement side of CTV has been it's sort of an ongoing change right now. A lot of it's driven around the convergence of linear and CTV. You've got the incumbent with Nielsen, and lots of other smaller players coming in to look to be the currency. But what's the current state of that in your guys' minds? How's it impacting your business? The sort of shifts that's happening there. Are there benefits to the ongoing changes? Are there challenges given that it's so up in the air? How's it impacting your business today?
Yeah, sure. I think we sit in a position where it probably doesn't impact us all that much. We're driving yield in both platforms. So, but it's an important problem to solve. We have, I don't know what the exact number of households is, but call it an awful lot that are both streaming and have linear in the same household.
That's a statistical measurement, an awful lot.
It's an awful lot.
I think we should quote you on that. I like it.
Does someone have the number?
An awful lot sounds good to me.
Mike, you have to have this number. 11? So Mike Shields said it's 11 households.
Industry guru Mike
So
Shields, it's 11.
It's a big number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More than 10. Definitely more than 10. Yeah.
I think the number is somewhere north of 20 million.
Yeah.
And we just need to get attribution right. It's really hard to do when you don't have IP household signals. And I think there's a lot of work still to get done there. And we're seeing a huge amount of progress from a number of players in the space. That space is getting funded heavily. So I think we're going to make progress over time there. We're not where we need to be yet to understand it.
A ways to go, totally agree. A big topic of conversation is using attention as a metric, right? And even to the point of intention measurement becoming so sophisticated that it can be currency in a transaction. What we're finding is attention is in the eye of the beholder, right? There's a lot of different ways to define attention. In the case of our business, we can literally guarantee attention, and we can use this same service of a value exchange to better understand who is sitting in the living room. So imagine a situation where instead of watching an ad, you're getting a survey that pops up on your screen that says, can you take 10 seconds to tell us a little bit about yourself? In exchange for that, you're going to be able to watch the rest of your stream ad-free. So we're introducing that type of panel-based surveying, one that, again, proves out the attention of the people in the room and starts to gather qualitative and quantitative data that we can give back to a streamer so they really better understand an audience, and an audience that's opting in to share that level of information, right? Because right now, the streamers don't really know, and it is, that is a frontier for us to explore, is measurement on CTV that will also enable a more relevant approach to targeting.
Yeah, and opt-in is critical here. The other, one of the pillars of the key things that's happening right now in the advertising tech ecosystem broadly is privacy, right? And data and signal loss. We know cookies are going away in 400 days, I think is the number of people are saying right now. At end of 2024. There's a lot of chatter about IP addresses, right? That's largely used in the CTV ecosystem. What's your guys' view on the sort of state of privacy as it's impacting into the CTV ecosystem? Doesn't feel like it's a lot of attention there yet. People are either opting into ads directly, or you're opting into a service that you are agreeing to more terms. So there's more first-party data, a little bit more ability. But where do you see that today, and where do you see it maybe changing over the next year or two?
I think we're all experiencing it being in France right now, because you see how the regulatory requirements are driving a different experience every time you're going to any website, and we all know that that's being rolled out state by state in the U.S. and over time will become more federal in terms of regulatory requirements. So kind of interesting that we're all waiting to see what the regs will be. I again would say, but if we're really putting the consumer first and respecting their privacy, can we use measures like a value exchange in order to have that opt-in experience? We've done research that has indicated that actually consumers are willing to share more about them if it means in exchange they're getting a much more relevant experience. Any of us would do that, right? Make the experience better for me. If it's a shopping experience, if it's a viewing experience. By the way, we're doing that every day in our Amazon shopping. We're doing that any day, anytime we're on Spotify and they're recommending a new playlist or new songs for us to listen. So we're willing to give up a fair amount if the brands, the platforms, the content providers are giving us something in return. And to me, that will just continue to be the future state of privacy protection. And it's more of a privacy-forward way to be building a business. Put the consumer's needs first and offer an opt-in approach.
I'm going to focus on the IP question.
Okay.
Because I think it's it's going to be a massive shift if and when we get there. I think what's driving a lot of the interest and excitement around TV is the ability to actually identify the household that you're delivering an ad to.
Yep.
If that no longer is an option, we start pushing TV back to what it's looked like in an unconnected world for a long time, which is data-driven advertising and more regionally based targeting, and we will continue to extract value over it. I think what it's going to do is it's going to determine the kind of advertiser mix we have in streaming over time. If you take that IP void, if you take that IP away, it really does eliminate the ability for many advertisers to be able to drive efficacy for TV.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. The CTV, one of the promises here is, we often talk about the dichotomy of CBS versus Facebook, right? CBS has 200 advertisers, Facebook has 12 million. And ideally with CTV, because you got a longer tail, because you can target a much smaller group, it can democratize, TV advertising to much smaller brands. Have you guys seen a big pickup in that? Are you seeing people experimenting in many different ways and doing quite targeted stuff already? Like, what's the state of that democratization today? Because, maybe let's put the IP addresses aside. Certainly that's a risk. But I hear more talk about wanting to open up TV than, necessarily all those advertisers coming today. Where do you guys see that, right now?
I mean, I'll start. We see tens of thousands of brands on our platform every month, so there's certainly an expanded footprint of advertisers that are able to take advantage of TV. I think what drives that is the ability to not have to commit large dollars to test into the platform anymore. So that's eliminating a huge barrier for many. But when you look at where the spend is condensed, it still is condensed in those 200 that are, spending the majority of dollars in traditional linear TV. So there'll be a shift for sure. I think IP is going to be the one, link to determine how big that shift towards broader demand density gets.
Can it be made up with the first-party data from these platforms?
For sure.
For sure.
Yeah, I think for sure. Yeah. I mean, it will be more robust than traditional TV has looked like. It just, to what magnitude?
Yeah. Well, but then it's also harder, right? And it accrues to those platforms that are scaled and get enough consumers, then power sort of resides in what's our consumer interaction. And maybe that comes back to, in that case, you need to be delivering a good consumer experience and an ad experience that people want to interact with.
Yeah, ideally, we hope that there's still a premium experience if you're putting the consumer first. I would say the other thing that is a real benefit for local businesses or smaller businesses getting into video is that used to be a major friction point from a creative standpoint. It was expensive to produce anything for video. Technology has certainly enabled a much more efficient approach to creative production. So any of us right now could have a spot on, through programmatic channels and through just literally using our iPhone, we could put a commercial on the air in the next half hour.
Well, and that is perfect lead into the next thing I want to talk about, which is AI. So we made it, almost 25 minutes in and haven't brought up AI yet. One of the areas where we're seeing a lot of people focus on the use of AI into advertising is on the creative side, being able to iterate, make lots of versions, and let that be a driver of performance, right? Because I think for years, a decade plus now into the ad tech ecosystem, the things that this ecosystem has focused on was efficiency around, who are we targeting and where are we targeting, and a lack of focus on what are we doing, right? And so, how do you guys see AI starting to take a role in this ecosystem?
It's going to be incredibly powerful. It's not, this isn't the buzzword of metaverse. This is going to continue to be a track that we're all going to lean in to figure out ways that our effectiveness can be more efficient without diluting the primary reason why we all first started coming to Cannes, and that was to celebrate the great creativity that human beings develop, and they develop it in such a way that all of us as consumers are part of the storytelling, or really embrace the storytelling of creativity. So I'm confident that AI is going to bring that efficiency over time. It's also going to bring the effectiveness, but let's make sure that the authenticity of the human voice is still a compelling part of the broader storytelling. And it's going to be both, right? It's not going to be an either or. And maybe because AI is going to enable faster turns or more of that efficiency, it's going to then enable humans to be much more involved in a more expressive and expansive way of storytelling. We can be doing more when AI is taking over some of the more transactional parts of the creative production process.
I couldn't say that any better, actually. and I think that the way we look at things is really through efficiency. And we've had creative versioning in our space for a long time. It's been wildly inefficient and economically hard to support. And if AI can bring more efficiency to that process, speaking more specifically to consumers through unique and targeted creative is going to have a fairly significant impact.
I think also too, I like your point on keeping the humanity in it, because TV advertising is very much storytelling, right? It's not a banner on the side that you're getting in the back of your mind. It's really building that brand. And one of the challenges with AI and performance is it can start to find things that may drive clicks but don't align with the overall messaging of what the brand or marketer is trying to actually drive. And so sort of keeping those things together is critical.
Really great creative advertising becomes a feature in your consumer streaming experience or watching experience, not a bug, right? I always love that expression. Is it a feature or a bug? When we do crappy advertising, when we just focus on the efficiency play and not the effectiveness play, the consumer turns off. You do not have their attention. You think that you may be getting the impression, but you do not have the attention.
So the next thing I want to talk about is CTV intersections. So one of the things we've been noticing is these different intersections around performance, local, commerce media, gaming. Let's focus on two that sort of come together, especially some of the stuff you guys are doing, which is the sort of performance and I guess commerce media. So performance, meaning the challenge with CTV has often been it's hard to get signal back from it, right? In TV in general, you're doing brand dollars, you don't really know what it's driving. You guys have, you're doing some of the opt-in stuff. The other aspect of what you're doing is bringing QR codes into the TV screen. Can you talk about like the adoption of that, or how are people using it today? What does it look like now and in the future?
I mean, I love the behavioral economics of what we're seeing with CTV, and I touched on it earlier. It's our ability to use the remote to manipulate what we want to have happen on the screen. We know how to do it on our mobile devices. We know how to do it on our desktop devices. Those are lean-in experiences. So we have much higher adoption rate on anything that requires an interaction on those two devices. Just think of yourselves. You may have your phone by your side, but something comes up on the big screen and is asking you to engage. I'm fumbling to find where the remote is and what button, and I have to remember what device I'm on and what button I'm going to be using. So over time, when there's more standardization on that overall user experience, I think that the behaviors will just naturally adapt. While we're dual screen viewers, which most of us are, and any of us with younger children 100% are, right? Everything is with a dual screen. That adoption on QR code has just become a normal behavior now. And so I think capturing QR code and then continuing that advertising experience on your lean-in device is where we're going to see much more of that interactivity happen.
Yeah, I would say for me, it really clicked in how much QR codes were taking off when I saw in the middle of COVID, like an 80-year-old, right, pull out their phone naturally at a restaurant and use it.
Yeah.
I will say I'm up for paper menus back at restaurants though for the most part. It's generally a better experience, but very efficient, especially if you're at the airport. The QR code is exactly where we need to be.
It's hard when you're dining with your family to say phones down when everybody has to have their phone up scanning the code. So I'm with you.
Exactly. Chris, there's the other biggest trend outside of CTV is commerce media, right? People are talking about this a ton. One of the things we've noticed is a lot of interaction between the commerce media and CTV worlds, really around first-party data, closed-loop measurement, and a lot of it's driven through partnerships with the large supply platforms. I know Roku's announced a bunch of things in that space. What are you seeing as publishers thinking about commerce media? What are they leaning into? What are they maybe scared about? How's it happening today?
Yeah, I think the primary discussion we're having, we sit primarily on the supply side, so we see very clear signals from that publisher. And I think what we're engaging in a lot of discussions around data fidelity and how do we get that first-party data that sits in that retail media ecosystem, and how do we create those direct high-fidelity signals back to them to be able to really leverage the power of that first-party data. And that's one of the trends we're seeing. I don't think the ecosystem's right now from a tools perspective where it needs to be to enable that to at scale. But I think we're seeing a lot of tools development to give retail media a more direct path with that data right into TV supply. So that's what we see, I think, the most, is really how do we just continue to create greater data fidelity.
Yeah, absolutely. And then data collaboration platforms and all that come into bear. All right, so last question for you guys, and then we'll open up for any questions from the group here. Chris, you touched on this before around the amount of inventory available. So we're sort of a weird place in CTV where, again, I talked about a lot of the platforms that moved into advertising. We're talking about 4 or 5 minutes an hour. You've got a massive, CTV is 25 billion, linear is 60 billion, linear is going down, CTV is taking over, some of that, and yet there's a lot less ads. And never in the history of a market, especially in the U.S., have we let those dollars just go away, right? As you mentioned, people aren't going to pay, $50, $100 CPMs. You can't just raise prices. One of the things we've been talking about is the recategorization of what is considered TV. So you have things like YouTube and potentially TikTok. What do you guys think is the future of this, right? As you've got more ad platforms coming on, right? Netflix, who was never going to do advertising, is now an advertising platform, and yet there's not the inventory there. Where do you see that playing out over time? Do you think there will be an inventory problem? Do you think there needs to be recategorization?
That's a really tough question to answer. I'll start by saying I actually do think brands will pay $80 CPMs if the value exchange is right. So I don't think it's as much of a cost thing. I think for some brands, high cost, high engagement makes a ton of sense. I think that it really depends on what data capabilities look like moving forward. And like I said before, you can't reduce yield and increase price and expect that you're going to increase demand density as well. So I do think there's going to be a balance we're going to have to strike. I think there's, as you mentioned, there's still $60+ billion sitting in linear TV today that is largely untargeted. Yep. We could talk a lot about addressable linear. It's this big. A lot of press because it feels like CTV. It is this big. Yep. So I think we do have to strike a balance at some point here between, broad reach, lower priced inventory, and this highly targeted, high priced streaming inventory. And I don't know where it ultimately plays out, but I think data is going to determine, what that looks like in the future. I also think, just one more comment, is we have to start to reimagine ways to engage consumers in a CTV experience that goes outside of a 30-second ad, a 15-second ad, so on and so forth.
I also know that there's going to be a proliferation of more inventory coming on the market as more platforms are, one, friction has been taken out of the system. Anybody can launch a streaming app today, right? We read in the press yesterday that Twitter is likely going to be launching their own streaming app. On our side of the business, we're talking to new streamers every single day, and most are coming to market with advertising. Yep. So you're going to have more of a, and this reminds me so much of early days digital media, by the way, of, you know, even going back to the dated term of a blog, and all of a sudden we had this proliferation of digital media sites that were going to unseat the big publishers in town, right? That never really happen, and we're seeing what's happening in that universe as we speak. But I'm not convinced that there's going to be an incredibly tight inventory market, and I am convinced, to Chris's point, that advertisers will always pay for a premium experience, especially as attention, whatever that looks like, becomes much more important as a measurement tool in order for advertisers to feel comfortable that they're getting a return on their investment. So the inventory is going to increase. The premium inventory will still probably be in less supply, heavy demand, and will therefore command higher CPMs or cost per engagement.
Yeah, we'll always leverage scarcity, right? Mm-hmm. Any questions from anyone here for these guys? Good to open it up, if so.
We were lucky enough to have Chrissy Argelon from Albertsons in our space the other day, and we talked a lot about retail media networks. Question, closed loop, more walled gardens, or opening up the future in terms of connecting media with actual results and sales?
You asking me? Chris?
11.
Nice.
Yeah, it's 11.
More than
11,
10.
11, yeah, more than 10.
It's 11.
I think it is very early days. There's a huge opportunity there on the closed loop attribution. It really comes back to, I spend a lot of time focused on commerce media and CTV are the two areas I spend the most amount of my time. You know, I think it was very interesting. No matter what, it becomes much more critical. Those data signals in a world where cookies are going away, IP addresses may be going away, and therefore closed loop attribution is key, but also the challenge with first party data is that it's you know, you get a very small overlap of what actually happened. What's going to need to be used is how do you take those signals and build probabilistic models on top of it to drive performance and be able to, again, probabilistically attribute how well is that going. But without that, without having some aspect of first party data and closed loop measurement that you can find what's working, it's really hard to determine any of those signals. And so I think that's going to be a critical part that it's going to play, and it's not everything's going to be able to be targeted on those first party data closed loop aspects, and scale is always going to be the problem there because very few platforms actually have lots of scale. There's a reason that Amazon is building the way they are and Walmart are, but most are not those size platforms. So
we've all been comfortable with lookalikes for a long time, right? Retargeting is often the one-to-one, but we, as marketers, have been comfortable with lookalike targeting forever, and that lookalike is just going to be able to inform more machine learning on getting us more precise in our targeting without actually always having to access the first party. So we might not need that scale as the probabilistic targeting becomes much more sophisticated and we have more confidence in that lookalike is close enough. Yep. Close enough is going to have to be good enough in many cases, and I'd have to say that marketers are very comfortable with that.
Yep. Said another way, 11.
11. Right. Yeah.
Until IP addresses go away, right? Why are we talking about probabilistic? I mean, with conversion in CTV today, you can get 80-90% matches on IP address to do deterministic sales match. Why are we talking about probabilistic at scale today? Is it because of the promise of IP going away?
So we want to be, future focused or privacy forward as well, and just how we and how we're prioritizing our investments in our own technology and our own builds. So, yeah, today is okay. What does tomorrow look like?
Yeah. It's also will help build the proof points, right? So you want to use as much deterministic signal as you can. I mean, just like cookies, they will be used until the day they're gone. So, absolutely.
We'll eat every last crumb.
Yeah,
right?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Anyone else? Okay, well, I think with that, we can wrap it up here. Thank you
Thanks so
guys very
much.
much. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Awesome.